Working remotely can be a challenge. I've been working remotely now for over 10 years, and I will tell you, I struggled at first. So many of you have been thrust into a situation where you've needed to work remotely, and it can be distracting. What we're going to share with you in this video is how do you actually create an environment that allows you to perform at your best, even though you're working remotely. 4 points: understanding who you are, creating the right environment based on who you are to win, winning that mental battle of getting up and doing the work as opposed to finding other distractions, and managing your expectations of you and of those around you when you work remotely. Well, self-knowledge is the key to success. Understanding who you are will really help you work remotely in the most effective way. So what exactly do I mean by that? Well, what I really want to understand is, why do I get distracted? How do I get distracted? What are things that might trigger me or get me potentially not at my best? And how do I correct those things or create an environment to avoid those things? Well, the first thing that I pay attention to are my biorhythms. For example, when is my energy at its peak? When am I really engaged in my work? When do I tend to lose energy, and how do I manage work in that context? So for example, I tend to be more of a morning person. By way of example, I'm recording this first thing in the morning. Between the hours of about 6 a.m. and 10 a.m., I am actually at my best mentally. So I try and schedule my quiet work, my project work, around those hours. Does it always work out? Not necessarily, but certainly you can increase your probability of success by doing that. Tend to have a lull around 3 p.m. So I try not to schedule things that are going to require a lot of brain power at 3 p.m. I might do things like just go through, check emails, do some organizational things to work my way through that time of the day. Sometimes I will even just schedule a break. So it's important to know when is your energy high and schedule your work around those times when your energy is the highest. Obviously, how you work with your team will matter, which sort of gets us to our second point. Are you an introvert or are you an extrovert? It's good to know. Introverts get their energy from being alone. They sort of refuel with that alone time. So recognize that if that's sort of how you operate, that you want to really pay attention to that. Whereas extroverts tend to get their energy by socialization and more communication and so forth. So what is it you need by way of socialization, communication, collaboration to get your work done, but also to get energy? Recognize which you are, extrovert or introvert, and you can plan meetings, gatherings, conversations around your energy. Well, avoiding distractions is very important when you're working remotely. For example, I don't work from a Starbucks or a place where there's a lot of traffic. Well, one, I'm a little bit more of an introvert, but two, I find that to be very distracting because I'd rather watch people than do my work. Others thrive in that environment. So create an environment that allows you to avoid your distractions. The television, for example, is another distraction for me. I don't have a television in my office at home. Some of us aren't lucky enough to have a space where we can have our own separate office, so it becomes a little bit more challenging. But by all means, try and avoid those big distractions and be as present as you can be, and you'll be more productive. How you like your work, structured or unstructured, really matters. So for me, I tend to be more of a structured person, so I like to use checklists, set daily goals, things like that. Others are more productive unstructured. Understand which is which, because when you work remotely, sometimes it's not as structured, for example, as when you're in an office. So you really want to pay attention to that and create structure for yourself. If you tend to like unstructured work, working remotely can be ideal for you because you'll already be productive. Understand which is which. Here's a tool to help you know yourself a little bit more deeply. We call it the Enneagram tool. It's something that we use here at Focus Consulting, and you'll see there's a website that you can go on and take a free test that'll give you an indication of what type you are. Well, why do we like this tool? We like this tool because it helps us understand what is important to us. It helps us understand our worldview. So we think it's important that if you go through this discovery, you'll understand your worldview and you'll understand what are the things that maybe get you triggered, get you distracted, or get you focused. and there are 9 different types. If you want to read more about this, Type Talent and Teams is a book by Focus Consulting. You can download it from our website for free, or you can order it on Amazon. This is about the Enneagram and the types within our industry, the investment industry. So it's important to understand how this all works in the context of the work that you do in the investment industry. Another book we like very much is The Enneagram in Love and Work by Helen Palmer. This actually really speaks well to working remotely, because it's not only do you manage yourself, but how do you manage the relationships around you when you've got to work from your home office, your family's there, and so forth. So we think both of these resources will really help you understand a little bit more about yourself so you can create the perfect environment for you to be as productive as possible. So what do we do about environment? What should we be thinking about? What should we be considering? Well, here are a few things that we've learned at Focus over the 20 years or so that we've been doing this and working remotely. So let's talk a little bit about just the physical environment first. Well, just like in real estate, it's all about the location. Now, we recognize that some of us are fortunate enough to have an office space at home where we can close the door, we can get quiet when we need to, we can use certain parts of technology. Where you locate your office and how you locate your office matters. Even if it's a temporary space and you realize that you'll be going back to the office at some point, or you'll be spending more time in the office, try and find a space that has some level of privacy to it. Here's one tip. Avoid creating an office in your bedroom. Well, the bedroom is where you go and you re-energize and you sleep. And what we found is that when colleagues create an environment in the bedroom, oftentimes they wind up suffering from a sleep perspective. They may wake up in the middle of the night and just sort of wander over and check the email. Or they may be getting ready for bed. Mentally, they're ready for bed and they go check email, and next thing you know, 2 hours later, you're turning out the light. So try and avoid the bedroom at all costs if you can. Now, if you don't have the luxury of a separate office, we found sometimes using a small curtain to create an office feel will help. And certainly if you don't have that available, all you have is your kitchen table, noise canceling headphones will help you, because they'll help you sort of stay in the moment and present with the work that you're doing at the time. So location matters, and to the extent you can have a separate location, good for you, but there are some tips that allow you to potentially have your work location in such a way that you can be productive. Here's one tip. If your work location happens to be the kitchen table or happens to be in a space that's kind of communal or shared by the family, when you're done working, close the laptop, close the devices down, and officially be done for the day. I've even gone so far as to take a towel, for example, and cover it up so it's not in the corner of my eye. I know that's a little extreme, but remember, I'm sort of organized that way. Well, light and sound matter when you're creating your home office. So remember what you're used to. You're used to an office space that is well lit, maybe natural light because maybe you sit by a window, or you're used to an office space that has fluorescent lighting or something where you're usually working in high lights. So remember that when you create your office space, to the extent possible, replicate the lighting from the office environment. You'll find that your body's sort of already used to this, and you will respond more productively in that way. So mimic the office lighting if possible, but make sure that you find a space that's got really good light, especially natural light if possible as well. Now, what about sound? Well, I mentioned a moment ago that if you happen to be working on the kitchen table or in a communal space, I find noise canceling headphones to be one of the best investments possible, because it really helps you focus on that which is in front of you rather than the distractions around you. Some of us like to use music. I, for example, enjoy classical music while I work. No lyrics, so nothing for me to get distracted by, and it winds up just becoming part of the background noise, but it also eliminates some of the noise around the household. Even though I have a separate office, there's noise around the household. One of our consultants actually likes to listen to heavy metal when he's doing deep thinking, because frankly, he doesn't really get distracted by the lyrics and he likes the rhythm. So think about the sound that would work for you. There are plenty of apps out there where you can actually download the app and you can get nature sounds, you can get white noise, whatever, but don't neglect the fact that sound matters. They find that sometimes silence isn't the best thing for concentration because we can actually get distracted by our thoughts. So see what works for you, but don't disregard light and sound. Use technology to help you. Working from home can be hard enough as it is. Working remotely can be challenging. So let's use technology in a variety of ways. For example, turn off notifications on your laptop. Turn off the apps. Use things that will actually help you be more productive, like collaboration technology. We use GoToMeeting. We find that to be very, very good for us when we need to collaborate because we can see each other's faces. And that's important to us. It helps you feel more familial. It actually creates a level of intimacy because you're not only seeing the person, but you're seeing maybe a little bit of the space around them. And we all have different spaces that we live in and that we work in, so that can be useful. So FaceTime when you can. If you happen to have colleagues who have the iPhone and you can use FaceTime or some other collaboration technology rather than a phone call, that can be useful as well. So find ways to actually have technology not distract you, but actually help you. Well, I learned this early on, and actually I learned this from a U.S. Marine who talked about winning the mental battle in the morning. And of course, you see there, hitting the snooze is sort of a bad idea when you're trying to win that mental battle. So there are certain things that will absolutely help you be more productive when you're working remotely. And there are things, by the way, that you're used to that you want to continue to use that time in productive ways. And I don't mean just working, but productive for you as well, taking care of yourself. Certainly routines matter. So remember about your routine. You get up at a certain time, you do certain things, and you have this rhythm to your routine. If you haven't worked remotely before, try and stay in that routine as much as you possibly can. If you're used to commuting, use that time that you would normally commute to do something productive for yourself. Maybe going to the gym, maybe taking a walk, or maybe getting yourself organized. But recognize that the risk that you have working remotely is the mental battle you lose is the fact that you don't separate. So you really want to keep your routines because your routines will help you separate work from your personal things. So continue to play those routines. For example, I still get up, I still get dressed, I still wind up getting dressed in what I would call sort of business casual clothes because that helps my mindset when I'm working in my home office. That's part of my routine. It's been part of my routine for over 30 years. It really helps my mindset. So don't disregard your routine. Don't roll over and hit that snooze bar. Community matters. Introverts or extroverts, stay in touch with your community. So if you're working on a team, be disciplined about attending your team meetings. Be disciplined about actually using the GoToMeeting or other technology that allows you to see other people. These are the kinds of things that will help you feel more a part of your team and of your community. So to the extent possible, stay connected. Also, take time out to take a break, to get out of the house or to get out of the remote location. If maybe you're working in a WeWork office or something like that, take time to get out and into the community so you have some time for yourself to recharge. Schedule those breaks, schedule your lunch, make sure that you're taking time to do that. It's very easy to get sort of sucked into working constantly, and that's not what we want when we're working remotely. And finally, here's some techniques to think about to help you with routine, with community, and with productivity. So one that we love here at Focus Consulting is what we call sprint and recover. So we'll work hard for maybe a couple of hours, and then we'll take some time, a break. We'll have a little bit of fun to recover and get our energy levels back up. Sprint and recover can also work in longer periods as well. Here's a technique while I was doing this research that I found very interesting, especially if you're trying to balance working from home and the family expectations. It's called the Pomodoro technique. Don't ask me why. But If you have task-oriented work, pick a task. Set a timer, for example, on your phone or on your laptop for 25 minutes. Put on those headphones and have at that task. But then set a timer so at 25 minutes, your timer goes off and you take a 5-minute break. A 5-minute distraction, kind of a mini break, a mini distraction, and then repeat that over again. I find that especially, for example, this technique works when your children are home or your spouse is home and you have certain expectations. Is that little mini break can help you just check in and keep you from getting distracted by all the needs around the family. So I found this to be a very useful technique. It's kind of a sprint and recover approach, but it's more disciplined than our typical sprint and recover, because sometimes we're sprinting for an hour or two, and then we find we're very tired when we get to the end of that time. I love a good checklist. So I will set goals for myself during the day or at the beginning of the day. For example, I used to commute an hour and a half, depending upon where I was living at the time. So I picked up 2 to 3 hours in my day when I started working remotely. Well, I use that time for two things. One, to take better care of myself physically. And two, I would take 15 minutes to create my checklist or my goals for the day at the beginning of the day. I tend to focus in on organization. That works for me. You may find that a checklist will work for you because it helps you create discipline and schedule. I even go so far as to put these things in my calendar because my team, we use a shared calendar. So people can see what I'm working on at any given point in the day and know whether, for example, they should call me because I'm available or whether I'm going to be deep into, for example, recording a webinar. And finally, be careful about multitasking. Working remotely gives us that temptation to think that we can do more than one thing at a time. Well, science has proved that this to be a fallacy. So recognize that if you are using these, for example, Pomodoro effect, you can concentrate for a period of time and then do something else. But this is all about removing distraction, folks. So make sure that you don't try and be all things to all people when you're working remotely. Whether you're working from home or you're working from some other remote location, recognize that multitasking is a way to lower productivity. We think it helps increase productivity. Science will tell you, no, it does exactly the opposite. So watch out for that. Manage expectations. So what do we mean by this? Well, first, your own expectations, but also manage expectations of those in your household. If you happen to be working from home, I will tell you this is one of the most challenging elements because, well, what the heck, you're home. So you can go pick the kids up from school or you can go and do a quick little errand or what have you. These are distractions, folks. And remember, work time is time for you to focus on your profession. Be the best that you can be. Be your best self. So you have to manage expectations of yourself and of those around you. And, by the way, the expectations of your team. Well, you're home, but you're really not. So you really want to focus on the fact that your office space is just that. It's sacrosanct. That's where you are doing your profession. That's where you are earning for the family or earning for yourself. So we want to make sure that, and routine will help with this, we want to make sure that we stay within those routines because that will increase our productivity. Now remember, you take breaks. So when you take the break from work as well. Go walk the dog, go play with the kids, do whatever it is that you want to do on your break time, but make sure that that break is also doesn't bleed into 15 minutes to 20 to 30, because then you wind up getting distracted. So you are home if you're working remotely from home, but you're really not. And you really want to make sure, this is why having a separate office space is very helpful. You want to make sure that your family around you understands that. Clarity, clarity, and more clarity. I can't say this enough. We found early on, as we are completely virtual as an organization, that we really have to strive for clarity in how we work. So what do we mean by that? Well, we like little techniques, for example, of a who, what, and when list. Who's going to do what by when on our team? Why is that important? Because it makes it so clear. We don't wind up doing duplicate things. We don't wind up stepping all over each other. We also make sure that we're clear about simple things like time zones. Often working remotely, you may be working across 2 or 3 or even 4 different time zones. So we always put things in. We will set a team call at 9 p.m. Eastern time or 9 a.m. Eastern time or what have you, because we really want to make sure that if we are dispersed, everybody understands what the time zone is. So really strive for clarity in your communications. If you are unclear, ask good questions and use a simple who's going to do what by when list to help create clarity when there's joint work required. Well, as George Bailey said, well, why do we have so many kids anyway? Well, we know family is such a gift, and it can be tricky when you're managing your family and you're working remotely. So I went and I researched this, and I talked to some of the best working parents that I know that have really done a superb job balancing this for many, many years. I struggle with this as well. My kids are now all old and grown, but frankly, when they were young, I was working remotely and it was challenging. So here are a few tips to help you manage family expectations that'll keep you from wondering why you had so many kids anyway. We talked about this earlier. Your workspace is just that. It's your workspace. To the extent possible, if you can have a separate space, that's great. Help your kids, help your spouse understand that this is in fact your office. And again, if you have to use the kitchen table or you have to use kind of a shared space, make sure they understand that this is what the space is for. As I mentioned, some people will use a little curtain to create that space. But it's all about sort of setting boundaries for those around you who now have this new experience as well. So you really want to make sure you're helping them manage that too. Know your kids' schedules and their biorhythms, right? For example, if your kids are a little younger, when do they take their naps? So you can schedule your work around nap time. I don't know what it was, but I have 5 kids, and several of our kids always had this fussy time around 6 p.m., and it would go from 6 p.m. to about 8 p.m. Well, there's no work getting done at that point in time, that's for darn sure. So recognize there will be times that you need to just make sure that you're focused on the family. Meal time, that's another time that is a special family time. So resist the temptation to work through that. Schedule yourself accordingly. Put it on your calendar. Block it out. If you use a shared calendar, then your colleagues will know when you're available and when you're not. Your kids will know when you're available and when you're not. You know your kids' schedules. You know their rhythms. So try and use that to your advantage. If you can secure a few mothers or fathers helpers during key phone calls or meeting times, that's useful. Many of us are put into this environment with unintentionally, and we can help each other out. So to the extent possible, you have neighbors and so forth that can help you, or older children that can help you. See if you can secure some help, especially during times when you need quiet, or when you need to be concentrating, or when you need to interact with your colleagues. If you can adjust your work, great. As I say, my biorhythms just happen to work really well, especially when my kids were older, teenagers. I was working from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. So about the time that I was really done on my concentrated work, guess who was just getting out of bed, right? My kids were, and that's when they might have needed me for a bit. So to the extent possible, if you can adjust your hours on those individual contribution things, that can be useful. I know many of us can't do that because we work on a team, or we got to work when the markets are open and things like that. Whatever you can do to adjust, try and take advantage of that. I love this one. This was from one of our colleagues, one of our consultants here, who said, we use the system to communicate when we're working, such as the kid sliding a little piece of paper under the door. My doors happen to be glass, so my kids would just come and wave at me if they needed something. If they're old enough, and once they start to get older, you can use things like text messaging. Any way you can to communicate, to let your family know that you haven't forgotten about them, and that you'll be right with them when you're done doing what you're doing. More often than not, happens when you're on a conference call, or you're in a team call, something like that, we use systems of communication to help us work through that so we can stay as present as possible with those we're working with. Sometimes you can negotiate this with your kids. Pomodoro effect, the Pomodoro method works very, very well here. Setting an alarm, letting your kids know, I'm going to be working for 30 minutes and then I'm going to come check on you, or I'm going to be working really hard for the next hour and then we'll go do something fun, we'll grab lunch or whatever. But setting alarms so your kids' expectations are met about how much they need to kind of care for themselves in the work environment. So this is a useful technique. We think it's something that you can negotiate with your family. If two people are working from home, this is a great thing that you can negotiate with your spouse, trading off those times when, if the kids are younger, they need a little bit more care. And that goes to this last tip, which really is, if in fact you find yourself in an environment where you're working from home, your spouse is working from home, really creating expectations and ground rules for who's going to do what by when, and who's going to do what with the kids, and who's going to manage this or that in the schedule today, tomorrow, this week. Really make sure that you set those expectations with your partner, because otherwise you wind up creating mis-expectations and there are certain things that were unsaid that can actually create drama in the house. So having this conversation with your partner is really important because it will really help you create the right environment for being successful, not only for you, but for them as well. And when you are unexpectedly thrust into a remote working situation and now both parents are working from home, this is something that really can create all sorts of unnecessary drama. So have that conversation, negotiate the schedule, and to the extent possible, you can make it work. So thanks for your attention in this. We hope you found that these tips were actually helpful to you and helped to create an environment for success. Having done this for many, many years, I can tell you that it is possible to be even more productive when you're working remotely. So lean into that. If you need anything from us at Focus Consulting Group, please visit our website or give Laura a call. We have all sorts of information on our website. It's all free, and we really want to help people be more successful than they ever dreamed they could be.